I would imagine there are guys who are just waiting to jump in the water in the NFL and the MLB, who, especially the NHL probably, who are just like, I can't do this anymore. I just wish someone would speak out, and the second somebody does, they're going to tag team on, and eventually you could have that coalition, I think.
Welcome back to another episode of Mic'd Up, everybody. I'm David Gordon, and I'm joined by august guest, John Doyle, who is a right-wing conservative political commentator. How's it going, John?
It's going very well. Glad to be back here. Looking forward to this discussion.
Absolutely, as am I. And we're going to talk about something really important today. As you know, that we've had LGBT propaganda jammed down our throats by all the elements of popular culture, and that includes our sports leagues. It seems rather ubiquitous that the sports leagues, NHL, NBA, NFL, are really popularizing and getting the pro-gay message out there and the pro-Marxist, pro-BLM message out there. And they're putting it in the face of the American consumer. What's behind the push to overtly politicize sports?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, the average person tuning in would probably ask themselves that. And even, you go to an airport now, you can overhear conversations with normal people just asking, why are advertisements always like this now? Why can't I watch a football game without having to see this propaganda now? And I think the best explanation is basically it's like a victory lap. I mean, it's raising the flag over a conquered enemy. We were talking about this actually before the show, how in the German language there are very long and elaborate words to describe very specific concepts. And I don't remember exactly the word, but they had a word that existed to describe specifically how if you were going to buy something in Nazi Germany, whether it were a car or coffee, you were going to see a proliferation of Nazi propaganda. You were going to see swastikas or something like that, which wasn't done necessarily to convince people secretly that if you're buying a coffee you should agree with the party platform or whatever. It's done basically to flex power. It's done to let you know that this is what we're doing, this is what's going on. And for the average American man watching football, I mean, he's probably enjoyed it his entire life. He's probably nostalgic about it. He probably watched it with his father. They went to games together. For him to now not be able to watch that without seeing drag queens, without seeing people kneeling for his flag, without seeing literally commercials, they put this out that say football is gay, that is humiliating to him. And for him to still watch that is kind of a humiliation ritual. So it's just a way of flexing power, I think.
I always laughed at the football is gay thing. It's actually not gay. It's a sport and it doesn't like other men. So who knew? Yeah. But here's a question. And what I don't understand is this seems like an unpopular thing, at least at the grassroots ground level. Is this a top-down push, or is it a bottom-up push? Because I can't see the average Miller Lite drinking NFL, NBA watching customer in his living room on Sunday being like, you know what we need? This game's pretty good. The teams are good, the sportsmen are good, but we need more gays out there, maybe doing some drag stuff.
Yeah, that's the problem is most people who take up these causes don't do so passively. It becomes like this militant reason for their existence. And so, their job might be in the NFL marketing department or something, but what they would regard to be their primary reason to exist would be to propel the cause of, the downtrodden homosexual or what have you. And so they become activists and they infiltrate these corporations. And they're on the payroll or whatever, but their primary job is to do things like that. And so I think it becomes a scenario where you've got these people who decide whether it's with Bud Light or with the NFL, we need to do this campaign, we need to have it be more appealing to certain demographics and promote these social causes. And maybe it comes across the desk of a CEO or an executive, but think about it. I mean, you've got some mid-50s guy, he's making a lot of money, doing well. Is he really going to die on that hill and go to war with the HR department, go to war with these people? These departments are comprised almost exclusively of women and homosexuals. He's not going to win that fight, because then he's one tweet away from getting canceled. The board votes him out, so he's probably going to be like, the American public has the memory of a guppy. They're going to boycott. They're going to say, get woke, go broke. But that never happens. These companies still keep making money. So I think they're just going to batten down the hatches and keep promoting it.
And that's what's something that's really insidious is, and I don't think a lot of people recognize this, and give me your take on this, but you've got these diversity, equity, and inclusion departments that are kind of now shoehorned into all the top companies, right? And at first it's it's just something we're doing to tick a box and show that we're not absolutely against the progressive agenda. We're with it. We go along. We march to the beat of the New World Order or whatever. But it's not a big deal. But what happens, I think, is you get these departments opened up, and they have to justify their own existence.
Yes.
Right. And they have to. It's not like, well, we're just not going to do anything. Then they start doing things, and do the leaders feel pressured to take their diktats and implement them?
Yeah, that's actually like I'm glad you brought that up. Like the whole concept of an HR department literally exists because women are now in the workforce. So it's like it's self-justifying because certain dynamics arise that now require policing. But no, it's totally correct. And anybody who's worked in corporate America will tell you like the HR department is like, the big boss. They're like the bullies, and everyone, even like the executives, like we mentioned, in a lot of cases are going to kind of keep their heads down because they don't want to strike their ire.
Sure, no, that's right. But okay, so I see why maybe the leagues are pushing this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I see why Roger Goodell might be on board. He doesn't want to compromise his position or draw unnecessary fire by taking a stance against the homosexualism and BLM Marxism that's being pushed. Fine, but what about the 30-ish teams and individual organizations that are in these leagues, that comprise these leagues? They seem to be uniformly going along with it. As a matter of fact, in MLB, Major League Baseball, only one team, and that's the Texas Rangers, for everybody out there who might want to get some Rangers gear, has refused to have a Pride Night. Everybody else has. And this goes, that's very representative of the other leagues too. Yeah. Major League Soccer, all the teams are with gay stuff. They're all pushing the gay stuff. The NFL, it's quite ubiquitous. NBA, quite ubiquitous, league-wide. Why is it so few organizations that refuse to go along?
I think it's simply cowardice. I mean, and that's the thing with the left and with the Marxists and the homosexuals. They'll fight. Like, they're incorrect, but they'll fight. And we might be correct, but we just don't have that will because I think we're too comfortable and sort of picking at the bones of what used to be a relatively moral society, kind of seeing how long that'll last for us. But I think it's like, look, I mean, you've got these guys who are making an absurd amount of money to play a game, which does not discredit their talent or say that they don't deserve. It's just like insane. I mean, they're living a great life. They get to play a game that they love. They're excelling, and they get to make a lot of money doing it. Now, is that guy going to be willing to do the right thing and risk sacrificing that? It's tough to say. I mean, he should, and probably they know that, especially if they're claiming to be Christians. But I think that's probably what it is. It's just cowardice. They don't want to put their money where their mouth is and risk that, backlash on social media or losing their job or something like that. Okay, and I want to go there in 1 second to the actual individual athletes that make up the teams. But I'm even thinking like team owners, Jerry Jones. Like, these guys have more money than almost anyone. You basically, to own a professional sports team, you, for all intents and purposes, are a multi-millionaire or billionaire. Yeah. And they're going along with it. It's not like they fear, like, oh, the children will starve if, like, the league strips me of the Dallas Cowboys or something like that. Yeah. They've got it made. So, and these owners are generally, I would say, tending towards conservative in their beliefs and Christian in their faith. They'll pray with the team before games and whatnot, and you get a lot of that. You see a lot of that. But they're not taking a stand, and they have all the money in the world. Yeah, I think it's probably just cowardice. And even like with those guys who claim to be, I mean, they're probably baby boomers or Gen Xers, they don't actually have strong conviction on a lot of social issues. Like, their support of homosexuality is basically like, they don't want the fight. I mean, if you ask them in an ideal society, are you going to have this represented? And they'll say, well, probably not if they're in private company. But they accept it because they literally do not want that backlash. And I think that's what it is. I think they don't want to have to deal with the headache on the one hand, as opposed to just like, okay, my guys are going to be walking around wearing weird jerseys for like an afternoon or something. Like, I think that's literally just a concession that they're willing to make so as to avoid the potential headache. Right. And you even saw that with kind of Jerry Jones capitulating, since we're on that individual owner with the BLM stuff and the kneeling. He's like, no one who plays for the Cowboys is going to kneel for the national anthem. But then before the game, he kind of offered the pinch of incense where he went, and it wasn't during the national anthem, but they like knelt with their arms around each other, sort of thing. Yeah. They all end up giving in. And I just don't see, I think what you said makes sense, but why isn't somebody just like, I have
$5 billion, so bite me, essentially.
Yeah. Now, I wish that person would arise, and I'm even skeptical of that. I mean, you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Like, if that team did a full-on display of kneeling in Dallas, I mean, that's going to affect them financially. Whereas the San Francisco 49ers, I mean, if they did that, like refuse to kneel, it's like a totally different story. So that was probably just appealing to the demographic that's most likely to like patronize that team and that franchise in the first place.
Sure. No, I get that. Definitely. Going to the athletes themselves. Now, and this is the core of the episode. This is what we really want to delve into. We have a ton of athletes out there. The leagues are overwhelmingly Christian, at least on paper, nominally. You have tons of athletes that, pray before boxing matches.
Yeah.
They, make the sign of the cross when they score a touchdown. They have pregame prayers. A lot of teams, a lot of organizations will do things like that. And yet, they are essentially goose-stepping along with an agenda that is overtly anti-Christian.
Yeah.
Pride, Marxism. Obviously, the popes are on record saying you cannot be a Marxist and a Christian. They're mutually exclusive worldviews. Obviously, pride, like the first sin, the cause of the downfall of the angels and the human race.
Yeah.
And sodomy, something that we're explicitly told in Scripture keeps you out of heaven. Mm-hmm. But you have all of these purportedly Christian athletes and basically not a peep. And if they say something, it's very weak, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, no, they're just, they're too fixated on the things that are of this earth. And even when they do, and we're not in a position necessarily to call into question these people's faith or their relationship with God, but observation would tell us that they seem to perceive God to be much less a father and much more a casino, insofar as they pray to God so that they have greater access to, material things, which they would call blessings. But they don't really seem to have a concept of sacrifice or discipline or anything like that. And you see this even in a lot of adjacent sort of pop culture communities where there are people who claim to be Christian, but the things that they talk about, not even the things, it comes out this person was struggling with this vice. Okay, he's a human. They're bragging about their pursuit of women, their pursuit of like luxury things, simply for, them in themselves, like not for any other reason other than like glorifying sin. And so for them to then wave around, the cross and claim that they're like Christians or something, that's a very bad example for how Christians are represented in pop culture.
Right, you definitely hear it. I mean, if you listen closely enough, the athletes will tell you that you're right about their mindset. They'll say things like, give God the glory, and then he gives you the victory. It's like, so that you can get glory?
Yeah.
Give God the glory and he'll give you the victory so you can buy a mansion and a sports car and a couple more.
It's like they're talking about like making like an investment or something. Like you put down $10 into this IPO and then eventually you'll get back $15. It's like, I don't think it's that simple.
But how, you've got these guys who can bench press like 450 pounds, like that. And they spent all of their lives living by a motto like, pain is weakness, leaving the body. And, I got to build myself up, have massive shoulders. Ape a man, caricature a man, basically. Mm-hmm. But then they don't have the fortitude to speak up when the most vile propaganda, when the most vile filth is being essentially lauded and pushed through the platform that they're part of. It's a paradox.
Yeah. Well, they're slaves. I mean, they're not real men. What defines being a man is not necessarily physical strength. That's certainly part of it. You have to be able to protect those around you, those you love, those who you're responsible for. But the reason I think physical strength is good is because it implies mental strength. It implies discipline. You're doing something every day that is building strength. You're active. And these people have no conviction. They have no spiritual fortitude. And so you see that where it's like now even, in a lot of the jock culture, for example, you'll see guys who still have that sort of protective paternal instinct, but then it is channeled through the current mediums of propaganda to where now you can be in a gym with your friends working out and maybe use a certain word you're not supposed to say, and they'll be like, what'd you just say about gay people? And you've got these like gym bros coming over you, we don't use that, that's a microaggression. And it's like, are you really gonna go to jail right now because I like said something that would have been fine 5 years ago?
It's always the first person plural too, where it's like, we don't do that. It's like, well, maybe you don't do that.
Yeah, you
I actually do.
I'm a man. I'm okay with using certain words.
Yeah, you get the gym bros white knighting for woke stuff. It's truly bizarre. Yeah. But I mean, they have cultivated virtue and discipline in certain regards. We can give them that. So what does it imply that they have discipline, that they can be in the gym at 5:30 every morning and, they can run like a 6-minute mile and, bench all this weight and squat all this weight, but they don't have the discipline and the fortitude to push themselves to speak out for their faith? Is it misplaced priorities?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. They are achieving the ends of, say, physical optimization, but not because they want to treat their body as a temple because they want to glorify God, but because of the vanity and the pride. I look good, I can use my body in a way that's going to achieve me more wealth and status and fame and things like that. So yeah, it's exactly that, misplaced priorities.
What do you think about the team mentality? Because I think it's been weaponized against us. And, one can go too far with the American individualism in a sense where it's like self-glorification. But these guys have been groomed their whole lives in these athletic programs to be like everything for the team. Yeah. Do you think it's kind of that pack dog mentality somehow that plays into this?
I think that is part of it, especially because if we'll say, the average American man can be roughly translated in terms of conviction onto like a football team. If that team is now going to exist as a mechanism to check somebody who might want to be like, I'm not putting this jersey on, I'm not kneeling. Now that person is going to be perceived as limiting the ability of the team. Like, dude, come on, like, why are you trying to do this for us? And I mean, that's tough. That's a really tough position, but that is your test. That is your job to do the right thing in that position, to stand up to your team and be like, look, I'm not trying to make this more difficult for you guys, but this is wrong, this is evil, and I'm not going to participate in it. And I think there's a lot of that problem with guys nowadays where the male fraternal group is supposed to exist to check and regulate male behavior. Like, for example, that word that we were just talking about, I unironically believe that the reason that word, in part, we're not allowed to use anymore is because that is like the most powerful mechanism we have to make sure that young men develop properly. Like, a guy's doing something he's not supposed to do, stop being gay. You stop being gay. There's like an impromptu court-martial system where now the other guys are like, okay, which one of you is actually being gay? And you move on. And guys learn how men are supposed to act, how they're not supposed to act, simply like that. It doesn't mean you're like homosexual, you're just being gay. Like, that's just what it is. And you can't do that anymore. And my generation had that. I don't think the Gen Alpha has that. Even now the Gen Z people, I don't think they have that. And now, not coincidentally, you've got the most bizarre, like, freak generation you've ever seen because people haven't been allowed to check male behavior the way that they would have been able to, like, even 5 years ago.
Sure. No, I think that's right. And it's funny. It's a deeper point that's hidden within, like, levity and the joke, right? Because obviously one of the greatest things you can say against somebody's manhood is to challenge his sexuality, which actually Catholicism teaches it kind of is a showcase of one's manhood. It's part and parcel of that. So, but I think, a lot of it has to do with people not wanting to be perceived as a locker room problem. Because yes, if you take this stance against your team, which from youth, from like pee-wee football, you've been brought up to be like, it's not about you, don't be a hot dog. It needs to be about the team. The team wins together. There's no I in team, like to quote a hackneyed phrase or whatever. They've had that mindset just ramrodded into them. And it seems like it's going to be a hard thing to get around, to get these guys to be like, you know what? It doesn't apply. Obviously, teamwork is good, but this doesn't trump the duties that we owe to truth and God. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. It's like, if you're prioritizing the team, well, then what ends are trying to be achieved by the team? And it's like, okay, a Lombardi trophy, great, but as a means to what end? Like, are you trying to glorify God, or do you just want the trophy? Do you just want the money, the fame, the status, or whatever, just all material things?
Do you think that is because people essentially have been doing athletics for the wrong reason? I mean, I would posit, and correct me if you disagree, but that athletics are a means to, sure, at the professional level, earn a living, but ultimately to cultivate yourself in virtue. I think people are starting to see athletics as an end in and of themselves, as opposed to a means, and therefore it's been made into a bit of an idol.
Yeah, I think it's like the bread and circus thing. I mean, you've got a lot of entertainment to distract people from how bad things have become. And with sports in particular, I would even go as far as to say it's like this almost politically correct tribalism, where you've got this instinct in you that wants to be tribal, that wants to be a part of something, to go to war against the enemy, to stand for your people. And now you've got people who are like, what'd you say about the Lions? What'd you say about the Cowboys? But then if you make a comment about, a social issue, about a religious issue, they like don't care. You could literally walk into the average American household and, walk in there, there's a dad who's sitting on the lazy boy or something and make some comment like, oh yeah, today I learned that I can actually be a girl if I want to. I'm going to go out with this guy and I'm also a guy or whatever. And the dad would just be like, okay. But then if you make some comment about his football team, now he's got a real problem with it. Or, we as Christians can't say that other religions are false. We as Christians can't say that certain behaviors are sinful and evil. But those guys over there in Philadelphia, they think they're so much better. You are allowed to go to war against other people for inconsequential reasons, but for things that matter, you can't do that.
You'll actually see it. People get into fights. Fans fight in football stadiums because somebody's like, the Detroit Lions are terrible, which they are. But then it's like, you said what? It's ironic. But then you can blaspheme in front of the same guys. They'll be like, everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Literally. That's funny.
Okay, so when there has been pushback from the Christian athletes, the soft Christian athletes, it's been pretty tame, hasn't it? It's never like, I object, homosexuality is evil and I will take no part in this, and for the sake of my teammates' souls, I'm going to speak out about this and try and evangelize my team and rally them to not take part in these pride displays or BLM Marxism displays. They never say that. What is that?
I think it's just a lack of the requisite spiritual education. I mean, I don't know what the average background is of people who end up playing professional sports, but I mean, even if you look at Christians nowadays, even those who would say that they're opposed to things like homosexuality, it would be very tough to get them to explain why. I mean, they would say because it's in the Bible, but if you try to get them to say because it's sinful and evil, they'll really shy away from that because the secular conditioning has been so effective on them. Like we were talking about this earlier, they would not say this publicly, let alone maybe even in private circles, that it's actually, they'll say maybe it's sinful, but to try to get them to describe it as evil or demonic, they would refuse to do that because they are more concerned about somebody hearing them say something that is socially unapproved as opposed to what God would think of it.
Sure. Let me say this. Here's a quote from two brother professional athletes who refused to go along with what was being done in the hockey league for promoting gay pride. Here's their quote. We carry no judgment on how people choose to live their lives and believe that all people should be welcome in all aspects of the game of hockey. Having said that, we feel that by us wearing a pride jersey, it goes against our Christian beliefs. It's always cloaking things in it goes against my religion. It's never just this is evil, be it far from me. It's always well, my religion says this, so you have to respect this, because it's you have two victim classes. You've got the sexuality protected class, and then you have the religion protected class. And it's we've become such a protected class society, you have to recur to your own protected status to criticize somebody else's protected status.
Yeah, and that statement, I mean, you can tell that it was probably written by their agent or something, but this idea of trying to employ Christianity in the victim hierarchy, that's never going to work for you because, one, we don't control the infrastructure that decides what that victim hierarchy is, nor do we control what enforces that. So first of all, they're never going to define Christians as actually being persecuted. And even if they did, who's going to go to bat for you? I mean, not even your team, apparently. So, and two, the whole Christianity, what do you mean your religion? As if it's equal to other religions. That in itself is so false. And then also, I mean, we're not here to LARP or whatever. We're here to save souls. And if you're going to let your team participate in behavior that is glorifying sin, pride, literally the worst sin, that is just as bad as wearing the jersey, I think.
No, 100%. And it's good to hear you call out the embedded relativism, because it's my faith. It's not God says, this is evil. It's always well, to me personally, subjectively, it's probably evil. there's just never the gratification of having somebody say a hard no. No, this is evil. I don't believe it's evil. It just is evil. It's against the natural law. You don't even need to be religious to know that it's evil.
Yeah.
It's contradiction. It's illogical. It's unreasonable. Sexuality is ordered towards this, and you're abusing it for this.
Yeah.
They never say it.
Yeah, and even the statement they said, what did he say? He's like, we're not supposed to judge individuals' behavior. You absolutely are. What are you talking about? You're not supposed to make a moral declaration on a person and say, you are bad, you are good. You're not supposed to do, but we have to regulate individual behavior. That's what we're supposed to do. This should be discouraged. This should be incentivized and encouraged. That's literally what we're called to do.
What is that? You never hear things like that. Oh, we carry no judgment on how people live their lives. It's like you never hear that in like the case of like Jeffrey Dahmer or something like that, or Adolf Hitler. People like to carry judgment with that stuff. It seems like what really the message here is we carry no judgment about this particular issue because we know it's going to get us into trouble.
Yeah, and it's too like the group that they're trying so hard to appease is the most judgmental group. I mean, if you've ever had coffee with a gay person, someone can walk in and be like, what are they doing with that that bag or those shoes? Like immediately. I mean, that's what we do as human beings. We make judgments. If you hired a babysitter and they arrived at your house and they had like needle marks on their arm, what are you gonna do? Say, I'm not gonna judge this person. You're absolutely gonna judge this person. You have to.
They say it's a mark of intelligence and that it's a survivalist instinct.
Your brain has evolved to like recognize patterns and have instincts and things. And you're just going to ignore that for what? For social adulation? It's ridiculous.
Right. So these individual athletes, though, they're always content to lose the game of chicken, right? And it is a game of chicken. It's who's going to swerve first, who's going to blink first. So you have these athletes, though, who understand, some of them are stars, veritable stars, and they understand their worth to the organization. Like, you can't get rid of someone like Patrick Mahomes and still win an additional Super Bowl. You can't get rid of, like, LeBron James, although obviously he's complicit in all this stuff, but a star of that magnitude. Like, why doesn't one of these guys, who is a star of that magnitude, who is indispensable to an organization, who is regarded as a leader in the locker room and has the respect of his teammates, why doesn't one of those guys ante up? Even if we're going to allow the other people, like kind of cowardice, to hide behind, well, I could get fired. Fine, then I'm sure there's a star who is Christian. Why don't they ante up?
I don't know that there is, honestly. I mean, you've got big guys who would claim to be Christian, but I think they probably just have insufficient spiritual conviction. Because if they didn't, I mean, they would. It would seem like such an obvious opportunity. I mean, there's no way that they could have that strength and then be seeing this propaganda, seeing, the jerseys they're going to have to wear, the flags they're going to have to wave or whatever, and not go to the locker room and just be like throwing their helmet or be driving home and calling their father or their mother and complaining about this, what should I do? I don't think that even happens. I would be surprised if that does happen because it's such a simple conversation to know, like, you're supposed to do this, you should speak out against this, or at least not participate in it, but these people just don't. I think it's just because they don't have that within them for whatever reason.
Yeah, that surprises me, to be honest, though, across all sports, that we wouldn't have one guy with the capability or the audacity to do that. So, I mean, do you think that there's back-end pressure being put by the leagues on these people, where it's like, if you speak out, then we're going to do X? Do you think there's subtle threats being made?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't know who would be ushering those in, whether it's like the agents or team managers, but you would almost have to, because, I mean, you're dealing with guys who are like alpha males. They're probably not in love with this type of stuff, to say the least. They know what group they're working with, so it wouldn't surprise me if they had some team meeting or memo that went out that was like, hey, by the way, we are not going to entertain problem children. You're going to have to go along with this. This is what the league is doing. And then, even the guys in the locker room probably just don't care enough to really want to stand against this. They probably are sooner to joke about it than they are to take serious issue with it, honestly. Just kind of be like, oh, man, look at this stuff, as opposed to just getting angry about what they're being forced to do.
You've used this term alpha male a couple times now. And what's kind of not the opposite of alpha, but it's kind of rival? Is that gamma male in like?
No, it would be a beta male.
Well, beta male is like the weakling follower, but now there's a term that's big in, like, especially Zoomer circles.
Is this sigma male?
I think that's right. Yeah. Where it's the kind of outsider who isn't part of the system, but who commands respect of a certain amount of like follower males who will challenge the alpha and is kind of like the outlier black sheep alpha. What we need right now, I don't know, I think what you're saying is we need some sigma males to challenge the alpha culture.
No, I completely agree. And there's this weird thing where now guys in my generation who actually care, they get called autistic. And the reason for that, I think, is one of the characteristics of autism is like a fixation that is perceived to be irrational. And in this world now, for people who are, going into careers in maybe media or sports, for them to want to stay convicted and do the right thing is something that literally cannot be conceived by their peers, because they're like, what do you mean? All you have to do is play ball. Who cares if you have to wear the jersey? You can get money. You'll be, first string. It'll be awesome. Why would you not want to do that? And they literally cannot comprehend that type of like conviction or fixation. And so now they make jokes and they just call it autism because there's no other earthly way to explain it. And so they perceive it to be like a pathology or to be deviant.
Right. You know what's ironic about that though? It's because you have the left who is the initiator of all of this political activism in like sports. And it's the guy punching you in the face, and then when you counterpunch, they're like, you're autistic for fighting back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand, but you're the one interjecting like lesbianism into football, right?
Yeah.
There's never that reaction. Don't people notice that? And if not, why? Because it seems obvious.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing with like the alpha male dynamic. It's like, what do you mean you're not going to wear the jersey, bro? It's just like, you look ridiculous right now. I mean, all of that weightlifting and everything just to literally be wearing like the pride flag. I mean, it's absurd.
Sure. Okay, so then let's go beyond that. I mean, I think the critique is well established and well grounded. What would we have these guys do? If we could, if Dave Gordon, John Doyle could coach up somebody to like a Christian athlete to engage in some counter activism, because they've got all the eyes on them, and this goes viral overnight if even one of these guys musters up the pluck and moxie to take a stand in a public way. What would you have them do, John?
Maybe, June is coming up, which they claim is Pride Month. Maybe I would have them do interviews talking about their refusal to participate in these sort of religious ceremonies, honestly, glorifying the pride flag or things like that. Whether it's during post-game interviews or maybe even segments on news broadcasts, or frankly, even social media is now such a huge medium for communication. They could even post something on their Instagram. And if they've got 1 million followers, which I mean, these big players easily have over 1 million followers, that's going to be written about. It's going to be syndicated. Everyone's going to hear about it. It's going to trend on Twitter or what have you. So even things like that would be very effective. And in terms of the effort that would take, I mean, the risk is huge, but the effort to write up a post like that or to just speak the truth in an interview is very minimal in terms of what they would have to actually put into that. And it's not something that you would even have to necessarily be strategic about. I guess that's where we would come in. It's just doing the right thing when you're supposed to be doing the right thing, which is simple, but in practice it is very difficult to do. Sure.
What would you say? Because I think we were talking beforehand and talking about the lack of tactics on the right.
Yeah.
What would you say if we were just like, let's use the whole system against them? They've gone to bat, getting Nike commercials, being like, you can kneel during the national anthem. Mm-hmm. So the left wins. When the left puts its puts foot on the pedal, it wins. So it's won. It's okay to kneel during national anthems.
Yeah.
They play the black national anthem before every NFL game.
Yep.
Right? Why doesn't somebody just kneel? Like, this is a Marxist thing. You're dividing the country. I'm going to kneel for your stupid Marxist national anthem that you're using to divide us into a national race war.
Yeah, that might actually spark the race war. I would love to see that personally, but that person would probably get serious death threats or maybe even physical safety violations, or their family be targeted, because I mean, quite honestly, this country worships like minorities and gay people. And what I mean by that is the same way that under a Catholic monarchy, society, there would be no decision made at the institutional level that does not first think, what is God going to think about this? We make no serious decision in this country without first considering what are gay people and minorities going to think about this. So for all intents and purposes, we live under this sort of like theocracy that just worships like minorities and gay people. So a person doing that would basically be the equivalent of a person hundreds of years ago making a public display glorifying Satan or something, because we have no concept of God or even Satan nowadays. So like our secular stand-ins are like Adolf Hitler is Satan, and then like George Floyd or Martin Luther King is God, and you just kind of have to find where you stand in between.
How did it get like this? I know that's a little bit of a pivot from the topic here, but I'm interested. What does John Doyle think? How did we get to this point where it is now the equivalent of a breach of the first commandment to criticize like the globalist, homosexualist agenda?
Poor parenting, honestly. And I don't necessarily fault the prior generations. I think they were sort of thrust into circumstances that made it sort of inevitable, but I just don't think that these values carried over. I mean, they're basically lost within 2 generations. By the time, the greatest generation and the baby boomers, and they just didn't carry it over. And I think Generation X, for example, is like notoriously cynical. I mean, these people really just don't seem to have any conviction. Millennials especially don't. My generation is like literally just depressed and openly sexually deviant and out of shape. Probably the worst generation to ever walk the face of the earth, to be honest, which again, I don't think is our fault, but it is still the reality of the situation. So I think it was sort of the situation where you had a lot of decadence after the world wars, and people were just getting too comfortable way too quickly, and they gave into all these social changes, which were instituted from the top down. I mean, there were very rich people who literally financed different pieces of media to be propagated, different literal like propaganda to be thrust throughout the culture, and it got to a situation where, in the 1960s, it seemed like really fun and innocent to go and experiment with different drugs and go to orgies in Los Angeles or whatever. But now my generation is growing up without fathers in the household, or maybe they died from drug overdoses or things like that. So it became serious very quickly, and I think they just sort of flew too close to the sun. And there's no way to really reverse that without some sort of serious cultural revival, but unfortunately, we don't have any institutions of power that can influence public opinion, so I don't really know how we would go about reversing it other than praying.
So are we just shouting into the wind, or do you think that, maybe through some actual right-wing community organization, and I shudder at the word, but or the term, that we can actually get some guys to stand up that are in these major sports leagues and maybe get a bit of a following, gain some traction of their own in pushing back against the woke agenda that the leagues are pushing?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of every person communicating this honestly to those around them. And what I mean by that is, I think it's like a 6 or 7, you're the handshake rule, where it's like there's no person in the world who you are farther from like 6 handshakes from. So it's like if I know you, you know somebody, eventually we can connect that to, LeBron James or something. If people are having these conversations with those in their immediate circle, and if water's seeking its own level to a certain capacity, you're hanging out with people who are good, authentic Christians, they're probably doing the same thing. If people are just more honest about the truth of God's word, eventually there could be some situation where that catches the ear of somebody who maybe is not a Patrick Mahomes, but somebody who's still pretty significant, and they come out, and from there it would just be a domino, because I would imagine there are guys who are just waiting to jump in the water in the NFL and the MLB, who are, especially the NHL probably, who are just like, I can't do this anymore. I just wish someone would speak out, and the second somebody does, they're going to tag team on, and eventually you could have that coalition, I think.
I think it's got to be like the story, The Emperor's New Clothes, where you get the one honest boy who's like, fools, he's naked. This is it. And then that's going to kind of collapse the wave function, to use like the quantum physics metaphor or whatever, and that's going to get the whole thing going. Is that what you're kind of saying? Is if we can just get the activation energy, then the whole thing then all of the support that's laid dormant for so long we might get some momentum there?
Probably. I think that's something that should happen just in general. But what I actually think is going to reverse things is The people who have power right now aren't the people who built the systems of the power that they hold. These people are not intelligent, they're not competent, and I think that within our lifetime we're probably going to see a situation arise where they are no longer able to maintain the system, so to speak. I mean, even right now you have like global US supremacy being contested by other top economies. The economy is a tinderbox. I think that these people are really spamming these types of issues, whether it's the gay stuff or the Black Lives Matter stuff, to maintain whatever soft power they have over their people. But eventually the thing's going to collapse. I don't mean a big dramatic collapse, but eventually I think power is going to shift away. And naturally society will heal, because everything right now that we're seeing pushed throughout the culture is so unnatural and backwards. It could not exist without this huge expansive government literally forcing it down people's throats. And when that goes away, when our guys get into power again, we can just delete it. And within a couple generations, people are going to be like, wait a minute, I'm actually like normal and healthy and I don't believe these things. So I think you can cut off the top-down influence of sin throughout society and heal very quickly, because you've got your guys on the ground, like you mentioned with the organizations, kind of making sure things happen at the grassroots level. But if you can cut off that faucet that Satan's using to deceive people, I think that would be enormously positive.
100%. And I think that's what people aren't getting on our side. Even the kind of leaders on our side don't understand that when you're doing something counternatural that's against human nature, you can't change human nature. You can cover it up, you can kind of hoodwink it for a little bit, but you always have to be putting energy into that system, or else this kind of entropy, which it's like reverse entropy, because in this case it's going back towards order, that's going to take over, and then human nature will win out again. So in order to push feminism, because patriarchy is a human universal, you always have to be pushing the propaganda.
Right.
In order to push to normalize homosexuality, you constantly have to be propagandizing, because everybody has always recognized that this is a crime against nature.
Right.
The sodomy is a crime against nature. I mean, do you think, though, that the reins of power are going to transfer? That the people who hold power now are going to lose it in such a way that they won't be able to drive propaganda?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. I don't think we're beyond our cycle of history. That tends to be what happens. And that's such a great point you make too, because, you know, if you look at how these people behave when they have power, it's very petty and very catty, and they really just love rubbing it in people's faces, and they don't really focus on what keeps the trains running on time. And eventually, I just think that that's not going to be sustainable for them anymore, because the people who are in charge of making sure the trains run on time right now, they're either off-put by the way things are going, they're retiring, or they're being excluded from the levers of power because of things like mass immigration or affirmative action or what have you. So eventually it's going to reach a point where they just simply can't keep things running anymore. And I think that, yeah, our guys could get into power.
No, I admire your hopefulness. Okay, so we're up against the clock here. The time's really flown by. I mean, you made some profound points, and thank you for being here and giving the audience some of these insights. I just want to leave off with this, and that's kind of opening the floor to you. Do you have anything that you would want to put out there, that you'd want to call attention to, that you'd want to get in front of these Christian sportsmen that may be watching, that may actually be influenced by what we're saying here? Do you have a message for them? Do you have any rallying cry you could give them? Do you have any words of encouragement you could give them?
I guess I would just say, you know, like we said earlier, we're not pretending that you haven't earned your position or anything. We're not pretending that what you're doing is like somehow less valid, but you are in a very unique position where, as you know, you've probably been very blessed in your life. Just do the right thing. I mean, you earned that, sure, but God gave that to you. You know, like you are in the right position. You did what you're supposed to do, but God gave that to you, and He's doing that because He wants you to do the right thing. So do the right thing. Again, it's difficult to do. Your teammates are going to get mad. Society's going to get mad, but you know it's the right thing to do. And ultimately, like, things that are of this earth are inconsequential. Your spirit, your relationship with God, that is what is important.
Right. You're going to have to answer at judgment for all of your omissions and commissions, for every single phrase, for every single jot and tittle that you've written. I think they need to keep that in front of them.
Right.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on with us
thank you for
today,
having me.
John. Guys, John Doyle, and you've been watching Mic'd Up. Signing off, this is David Gordon.